if you'd like, Amanda.
We are recording.
Okay. Well, let me introduce myself really quick. My name is Allie Muschlitz. I'm a licensed psychologist at the Counseling and Mental Health Center, and I'm a liaison to the College of Graduate Studies. So if you've attended any of the mental health grad series, you are probably pretty familiar with my face. And today we are going to be talking about building positive academic relationships. Now, I'm going to be doing a lot of talking today, but at the beginning, I am going to encourage you to put out any of your thoughts. We have some kind of questions that I'm going to throw out at the beginning. And this is mostly because I want to get a sense of what are you interested in specifically learning from this today's presentation. It can help guide, a little bit of what I discussed today to hopefully curate it a little bit more towards what you're looking for. But for most people, whether this is your first year in grad school or even just your last year in grad school, there's, common questions in graduate school experience of how do I build these really positive academic relationships? And sometimes even questions about how do I build academic relationships that can last beyond even graduate school. So hopefully I have some good skills and tools that may help you in your journey as well. Oops. Let's see. There we go. So I guess my first question that I want you to be thinking about, if you feel brave enough, you're welcome to raise your hand or put your comments in the chat. But my first question is I want you to think about is, what are some of your goals and aspirations when it comes to building academic relationships? What kind of academic relationships are you looking to build? And what are kind of your goals surrounding that? For example, sometimes it's how do I build mentorship with those academic individuals around me? How do I build relationships where I can ask for advice when it comes to research or career or kind of long-term goals that you may have? I think I see something in the chat. Let's take a look. Amanda looks like, with my faculty advisor, it's really important to me to understand their expectations. Yes, sometimes it's really basic goals. I want to make sure I understand my faculty members' expectations or their goals or timelines. That can be part of it as well. Any other, things that we want to share? Again, you can put it in the chat or you're welcome to speak up as well. Anything that you're thinking about when we're talking about goals and aspirations with academic relationships? I think one thing that I had when I would go back to my graduate school experiences, how can I make connections with some of the advisors I have in my graduate program so that I can get advice for career? Because eventually you graduate and you want that kind of advice of how do you get into the career field or how do you network or how do you make connections? Oh, I see another one. I would like to have references for the future. Yes. This is part of that too, that career talk, or a friend to talk to, or have good networking. Agreed. I think those are really great goals for graduate school and academic relationships. Thank you so much for sharing. Well, I'm going to actually move on to the next question, which maybe is a little bit harder to think about, but maybe is one that is most helpful to today's conversation. What are some of your worries or your concerns when it comes to building academic relationships? What are the things that you're kind of in the back of your mind worried about or thinking about? I think sometimes when I think back to my experience, I was worried, what if I wouldn't make those connections? Or thinking about, what if I don't make the connection in a way that is helpful? Or what if I kind of mess up and they change their opinion of me completely? Sometimes those kinds of worries and concerns can come up. Any thoughts on that? And it doesn't have to be the most vulnerable worry or concern. Maybe it's a really basic level concern that many people experience. But I'm curious for you, what are things that you're kind of worried about as we're thinking about building these academic relationships? Okay. Well, it sounds like we might not want to be in the sharing mode today, and that's all right. At the least, I want you to think about in the back of your mind, what are some of the things in the back of your mind that you may be worried or concerned about? And maybe how do some of the strategies that we talk about today kind of help address some of those things? But if you still have those thoughts at the end of this presentation, feel free to bring them up at the end of our time. I see one that from Amanda is, what if I don't have time for friendships with students? Oh my gosh, this one is a very regular one that is brought up. And we'll talk a little bit, I think, about it here in a little bit, but some of that is time management, or how do I make a small portion of time or a really intentional use of time to socialize and make friendships during graduate school. All right. So now I'm going to talk about some general guidelines. We'll go more in depth on specific relationships in a moment, but I want you to think about what are really basic things that I should be thinking about as I'm building relationships. Some of this may feel like a review, but some of it we might take a step further than you think. So active listening is one of those. As simple as that sounds, this is actually something a lot of people struggle with, right? It's that not just listening to what another person is sharing with you, but giving some eye contact, looking at them, letting them know you're listening through subtle gestures. It could be a simple kind of nodding of the head, or yeah, kind of a validation that you're hearing them, or summarizing what you heard, after they finish kind of saying what they've spoken to you about. It's like you're kind of summarizing what you've heard. It sounds like, or what I'm hearing is. And those are really great skills, not only for building relationships, but for also continuing development of relationships. The reason this is really challenging is sometimes we get distracted, or we're kind of multitasking. I mean, I can imagine if I were to ask for a raise of hands of how many times somebody here has been in a conversation with someone and they're on their cell phone, right? That is a really common thing that happens. And so thinking about these things of how can I be really present in these moments with people? Another one is self-awareness. This is kind of that awareness of nonverbal communication, right? If I'm talking to someone and my face is kind of like, it might not be intentional on my part, but maybe my nonverbals are sending a different kind of message that maybe I'm not interested or I'm distracted. So being aware of kind of your own nonverbals and what messages you're sending through that way is helpful. Another one is empathy. Sounds easy enough, but sometimes people do struggle with this in day-to-day conversations. Kind of awareness of the emotion and experience of others. Sometimes people can feel invalidated in conversations. Maybe that's, someone doesn't really acknowledge, their experience or emotional experience, or just kind of dismisses it really quickly. And so the encouragement here is to have some awareness of what others in the conversation are experiencing, and maybe kind of, putting a nod to that experience as well. Another one is courage to speak up. I think this is usually the most challenging one, especially as we're building new relationships. Sometimes people feel a bit anxious and nervous and with new people and new conversations. So I would, even if it's a small thing, kind of that courage to speak up and say hi, see how someone's doing. I will say this is highly dependent on the context. There are some contexts where speaking up may not be appropriate. For example, maybe you're in a lecture and someone's right in the middle of giving that lecture. That might not be the time to speak up. But if it's a one-on-one conversation or even a group conversation, having that courage to kind of say some things, check in, show that you're present and wanting to participate in that conversation can go a long way. And I also like to note gaining the courage, right? Maybe at first you're not speaking up in every context, but maybe the goal is just in one conversation today, I'm going to choose to lean into some courage and say something and speak up within the conversation. So kind of subtle steps towards that gaining of the courage. One of the best advice I think I could give in any conversation is genuine curiosity. Whenever someone asks me for advice on conversations, how can I, start a conversation? How can I build a good conversation? This is honestly the best advice I could give. And it's the best advice I've been given. And that is that genuine curiosity. So much, we have these, sometimes surface level conversations. I think you probably have all been at that point where it's, how's your day? How's it going? Or, oh gosh, did you see that thing on the news? Or did you notice the weather is going to get bad, right? And so my kind of encouragement would be to think about ways in which you can be more genuinely curious in your conversations because one, it shows to somebody that you're actually interested a little bit more in that conversation. But two, it can lead to really interesting and fun conversations and more meaningful conversations. And and something else I'll highlight is sometimes I get from people, well, I can't really think of anything specific to this person. Sometimes you can have genuinely curious questions that apply to a wide range of people. For example, I'm a faculty member. I meet new faculty at the beginning of every school year. And one question I always ask that I am actually genuinely curious about, for me, that's what brought you here? Because sometimes what brought people to the University of Idaho is just so interesting. People have different stories. They're coming from different places. Whenever I meet new faculty at the beginning of the year, it's really cool to see where people are coming from because they come not only from different parts of the country, but even outside of the country. And so not only hearing where are they coming from, but their experience of how they ended up here at the University of Idaho can be very fascinating. But that's also a question that I can apply to graduate students, right? We have a lot of graduate students who are coming to the university that might be coming from different places, different experiences, different places in life. And so sometimes having those genuinely curious questions ready can be helpful. And last but not least, effective communication. Good communication skills go a long way. Being direct, being kind of clear in your communication. Sometimes when we're talking to people, if we're a bit nervous, we can run circles a little bit in our conversations of, I was thinking about this thing and was wondering about how you felt about it, but then I was thinking about this, and then we kind of go on a long tangent that eventually leads to a question or a thought. But sometimes when we can be a bit more concise, that can go a long ways in a conversation. Okay, so those are just some general kind of things I want you to think about as you're thinking about your relationships. They apply to a wide range of relationships, like I mentioned before, but I think they are important to consider. And sometimes those really small things are the things that we're not really thinking about, right? We think, well, active listening, yeah, of course. But if we really reflect on our day-to-day interactions, how good are we really being in those moments with people? So those are just some good reminders at the least as you're thinking about your interactions and relationships. Now I'm going to kind of transition to talking about experiences and relationships with advisors and professors, some things to consider, and things maybe for you to think about. Maybe you already have a relationship with an advisor or professor and you're wanting to kind of continue building upon that. Or maybe you are new, maybe you're a newer graduate student who is looking to build those relationships. So here are just things that may be helpful to consider. So the first one we'll talk about is learning. That is getting to know the person, whether this is an advisor, a professor, a mentor. Get to know that person. What is their research? What are their scholarship activities? What kind of qualities does this person have? And what are ways that you can get that information, right? One is maybe researching the individual. Most professors and advisors have, well, not most, there's a lot of professors and advisors that have a little synopsis on the webpage about them and their scholarship and research activities. But if not, maybe it's doing some research within your department to find out. Maybe it's talking with other graduate students. Maybe it's talking with past advisees or students that have worked with this advisor or professor, or talking with other staff members or other professors that may have worked with this person. And that is a great way. Knowing more about this person, their experiences, especially scholarship and research, as that's usually a very applicable area for graduate students, can help you get to a better sense of that person, but also get a better sense of what qualities this person has. It could be their academic abilities or their academic qualities, but it might also be their interpersonal abilities, right? Some professors are much more interpersonally engaged than others. It kind of just depends. And knowing more about the person that you're working with may be helpful information to consider. The next one is understanding. I think, professors, advisors, and graduate students, we may be coming from a variety of different backgrounds, experiences, and sometimes because of those differences, there can be some challenging bits of understanding one another. So this is just kind of encouragement to try to consider and respect what the person that you're working with has to offer and their differing perspectives, experiences, and areas of strength. What does this person have to offer me in terms of their knowledge and experience that may be helpful for me in my experience? Rapport can build when there is that mutual respect and understanding. Just because I may come from a different background or experience than the person I'm working with doesn't mean I can't hold that mutual respect and understanding about their experience and their perspective on things. And once there is kind of that shared mutual respect and understanding, rapport is usually fairly easy to start building from there. Another one is expanding. Oftentimes in for graduate students, you're connecting with maybe one or two advisors at most. And this is just an encouragement that you may have somebody who is your academic advisor, right? Somebody that you're working more intensely with, but you have these range of other professors and advisors around that you can seek, their guidance and their ideas. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be necessarily towards your research, but it could be for a variety of professional development, career development, maybe getting their thoughts on a particular theory or research or things of that nature. So this is just an encouragement and thinking, you may have an advisor you're working with closely, but also who are other people you can start to build rapport with and build relationship with that may benefit you as you are continuing down your academic and career journeys. So this is just kind of an encouragement of thinking about those other people and ways that you can connect with them as well. Shocking, the next one is being proactive. This is the one that everyone knows, but is often so hard to do. And that is reaching out. Reach out when you have questions, when exploring a scholarly interest, when you are seeking career advice. Most professors and advisors actually really enjoy it when students do reach out. Even when you're postgraduate, reaching out and asking for advice or just sharing kind of where you're at, that can be very helpful. But as you're in graduate school, especially with someone who's, maybe your academic advisor, your research advisor, making sure that you're connecting with them and reaching out on a regular basis is very helpful. Maybe that's sending an email, maybe that's sharing what you're working on, maybe that's attending office hours or trying to attend events or conferences that this person may be present for. Maybe this is somebody who isn't your academic advisor, but you want to connect with more. So thinking about those opportunities to connect. And my biggest encouragement is reaching out. I have a lot of graduate students who will say that they will reach out, but then later admit, yeah, I got too nervous, I didn't. But I will say for most students who do reach out, they have a lot of positive experiences. I can't say everybody, but most do. And so I would encourage you, if there's someone you're wanting to connect to more, or you have questions that you feel like they could help provide guidance on, try to reach out. And again, a reminder around effective communication skills regarding expectations and responsibilities. That's usually the biggest ones we're talking about with professors and advisors. I believe Amanda mentioned that earlier. Reaching out to them, and especially to clarify any concerns around expectations or responsibilities, or if there's confusion around those. A couple of things I will encourage is try to utilize that person's preferred communication method, right? As much as kind of email is the go-to these days, there are some professors or advisors that prefer other modes of communication. Maybe that's attending office hours, having a regular meeting scheduled. So get a sense of the person that you're wanting to connect to and what their preferred communication method is. Communicate clearly and directly. If you're needing clarification, asking really direct questions can be helpful. Sometimes when people can attempt these roundabout attempts at clarification, it can come across confusing, and sometimes those questions don't always get answered because there is a bit of confusion. So trying to be more clear and direct in that communication. Having regular contact helps a lot, as the more regular contact you have, the more familiar and the more in line people feel with what's happening. And then assure there's mutual understanding, right? Maybe it's summarizing, a plan, or summarizing what way you guys have come up with for regular check-ins, or how you're going to choose to communicate. Similarly, like I just mentioned, having regular points of contact, especially with someone like your academic advisor or professor you're working with closely, that is very helpful. That doesn't always happen, but I do encourage you, if you're able to, try to set those up. Maybe it's keeping the person informed on current events or progress, such as a research study or a project you're working on. For some people, it's having scheduled regular check-ins. Maybe it's every other Monday at 2 p.m. But maybe that's an encouragement for you, that if you don't have regular check-ins with your professor or advisor, and you think it would be beneficial, maybe that's something to reach out to them about. Email or message with updates. That's something I encourage with somebody. Sometimes professors and advisors can be busy, dependent on the individual, and not everybody is able to schedule regular check-ins or meetings. And so another alternative could be emailing or messaging with updates and progress on the research or project you're working on, or where things are currently at. Planning, this is really dependent on the relationship. I will say some relationships are more about networking, kind of mentorship. And so maybe that is a little less focused here. But I think either way, planning can be very helpful. Whether that's, I'm working on this research project and we're coming up with a timeline of which we want to accomplish certain goals. Or if it's for more, mentorship, maybe it's a timeline for how often I want to reach out to this person. I still have actually old advisors still in my life. And I just, it's not something I necessarily schedule, but for me, it's helpful that every 6 months, sometime within that 6 months, I try to just reach out and check in with that person, because having that continued contact I find very helpful. So maybe it's building a timeline of tasks or events, planning meetings or appointments ahead of time, building a trajectory for meeting goals. And again, this kind of is very dependent on the particular type of relationship you're building with a professor or advisor. Feedback, I think this is a really big one that can be very hard for individuals, especially once we start getting to graduate school, because you end up getting a lot more feedback in graduate school than comparative to undergraduate. And so here are just a couple things I want you to think about. Of course, we want you to be open to feedback. That's a lot easier said than done. So maybe it's kind of checking in with yourself of, what are ways that I can approach feedback that may be helpful, and communicate that I'm open to that feedback. Seeking feedback can be very helpful, because the more feedback we have, the better we can become on whatever it is that we're working on. And then responding professionally to feedback, right? Not all feedback is great feedback. I'll be honest. I think you probably have had an experience or two where feedback wasn't always the most helpful, but we can still respond in a professional way to the feedback that we get. And then we on our own can evaluate that feedback and determine whether or not it's helpful and how we want to incorporate it if we choose so. Having ongoing conversations of what is going well and areas you can continue to grow, that can help a ton for people. Just because it means that there's an ongoing conversation, there's an ongoing kind of check-in rather than, these big moments of feedback. When there's kind of regular and continuous feedback happening, people tend to feel a lot better. It tends to be an easier process for people than, once a year or once every 6 months, you get a large portion of feedback. So if you are able to do that with a professor, I would encourage it. And maybe it's actually asking the question, what do you think is going well on this project? What do you think, are things that we can continue to grow? Or maybe it's yourself in terms of your own skill sets and competencies. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about challenges and resources at the end here. This is really a common thing that we, I swear every time we have one of these presentations, there's always somebody who's like, man, things are just really tough with my professor. I've tried all the things that you've talked about, or I've tried different strategies, and things just really haven't, kind of meshed together, or I'm not able to figure out a schedule, or it's hard to communicate with this person. And my biggest encouragement first is to try to talk to the person if you're able to. If they're unwilling to talk to you in person, maybe it's sending an email saying, hey, I've had some challenges in communicating around this. I'm hoping maybe you and I can work together and try to find a middle ground. What's helpful about that is one, you're directly addressing the issue in of course, a professional way. But two, it kind of helps support you if you do experience a lot of challenges with a professor, because then you can say, if you need to take additional steps, hey, I tried to talk to this person, I tried to work it out, I really didn't get much, and that can help you a little bit if you're seeking additional help or resources. And that's my last one is if you're really having challenges with a professor that you're not able to work out with that professor, there are resources available. So I just want you to think about those things because I swear every time we have this conversation, it does come up. And so thinking, what are resources that are available? Michael and Amanda are great resources here in the College of Graduate Studies or can point you in the right direction. Also, being aware of the policies of your department and college and departmental procedures. If you're really having issues with a professor, there are different approaches for different departments on how they want you to handle that. But I think my biggest kind of encouragement is assume good intentions. When you don't hear back from a professor, it may not be intentional. It may be that they're really busy or they kind of lost your email in the midst of all the emails they're getting. And trying to reach out can be a very helpful tactic, but there are resources available if you need additional help. I have just covered a lot on advisors and professors. I've spoken quite a bit more than I usually prefer. I'm curious, what are your guys' thoughts, or do you have any questions as we've brought up a lot of different ideas and strategies on how to kind of connect more or how to build that rapport with your advisor, professor? Any thoughts or questions so far? Becky, are you trying to say something?
Oh, sorry, no.
Oh, you're it's all good. I just wanted to make some space. There's a lot that we kind of talked about in that realm. And I'm happy to also,
Yes, sorry.
oh, you're good. But if you have any questions along the way, feel free to put them out there. Or if you feel like you want more kind of specific, advice on a particular type of academic professor relationship, I'd be happy to provide any guidance. So now I'm going to be transitioning to talking about connecting with other graduate students or professionals, because some of the strategies that we're talking about can apply to both. And because it is considering both, some of these may be a little bit more generalized. If you are looking for more specifics, I'd be happy to speak to anything more specific if you have ideas. So before talking about specific strategies and kind of connecting more with other graduate students or other professionals, there's a couple things I want you to consider for yourself that may be helpful. So the first one is, who do you already know? Who are people that maybe you've connected with but are looking to maybe connect on a deeper level or get more connected? Or maybe I've met them in class and they seemed really great and I want to make a greater connection. This is honestly my best advice, because there are often people already in the circles that you run that you've met, but just haven't had a chance to connect with on a deeper level or more, or get more connected with or more familiar with. So I really do want you to think, who are the people already in your life that may be already present that you could connect to more? I also want you to think about your current level of involvement, and the involvement being kind of social involvement. You know, what is kind of your current level in which you are involved in? Maybe it's graduate student, events, or graduate student, social activities. Maybe it's kind of networking opportunities to connect with other professionals. What kind of time or energy are you putting forth already? Oftentimes, I will say with graduate students, what I hear the most is, I'm really busy. And so because of that, I'm either at school, at work, or right at home. And as great as that is, oftentimes if we're solely focused on school or work in those environments, and then the other alternative is home, it may be very challenging to find people to connect with if we're looking for other students or professionals in which we want to connect with. So the reason I have you thinking about that is, what are you doing to maybe help expand it? Maybe it's, I know there's this event, going on for graduate students. Maybe it's taking a chance and trying it out. Maybe it's, I know there's a bunch of graduate students gathering together to go get food, and I could go join in. Or maybe there's a networking event that would provide an opportunity that I could attend. So thinking about your current involvement and kind of trying to expand that if you're looking to connect with more graduate students or other professionals. Exploring opportunities to connect. What are events, activities, networking experiences that are available to you? And that's more of that kind of thinking more intentionally of, what are the opportunities around me that I could connect with more to continue to expand my network of graduate students and other professionals that I'm networking with and connecting with. And oftentimes there are a lot of things, but maybe we're choosing to kind of sit out on them. So I'm encouraging you to think about, what are opportunities? It could be really informal. It could be a bunch of graduate students that that are grabbing food, or it could be a professional networking event. So thinking about those opportunities that are, with things that you're aware of, maybe things that are happening within your departments. There's tons of events that we'll talk about later that happen within the College of Graduate Studies. So thinking about those opportunities. And a big question is, what kind of individuals do you want to connect with? That's the big question. Who are you looking to be more connected with? Is it more socially? I just want to feel more socially connected with other students my age, other graduate students. That's a different goal than someone who's like, well, I'm getting close to career and I'm wanting to connect more with other professionals so that when I make that transition, I feel like I have some people I can reach out to, right? Those are kind of two different goals. So I do want you thinking about, who are the individuals that you want to connect with, because that helps with actually the next question. And that is, what kinds of settings, events, or environments would this type of person spend time? So again, thinking about that individual you may want to connect with more, what kind of places are they spending time? That can be very helpful. What kind of events are they attending? Where do they tend to be more present in their day-to-day life? And that can help you get a sense of, where do I need to spend more time to be able to make more of these connections? Any questions on any of those things? All right. And then additional kind of considerations. So I think, again, those opportunities, finding ways to connect, thinking about the kind of person that you want to connect with more. What are ways or opportunities that you can connect with them more? Maybe it's and I think the biggest encouragement, is when we're talking about these different strategies and approaches, people may think, wow, this is going to take up a lot of my time. And that's definitely not the goal here. The goal is maybe just setting one small goal at a time. For example, if I'm wanting to network with other professionals more, maybe it's, I know there is a conference, maybe there's a network kind of gathering that's coming up. Maybe the goal is that I just attend one of those things. Same thing if I'm wanting to just socially connect with other peers my age or other graduate students. It's, maybe there's an opportunity. Maybe it's, attending one of these COGS events, or maybe it's, I hear graduate students are getting together on Friday night. Maybe those are ways in which I can just set one small goal to attend one of those things and just continue to expand those connections. I think one thing I really will encourage is stepping outside your comfort zone. Oftentimes, when we're talking about socially connecting, the real challenge is, how do I, get outside that comfort zone that I've become very acclimated to, right? Maybe I go to school and I'm just there for school stuff, and I go to work and I'm just there for work stuff, and then I'm home. Unless I'm getting groceries, good luck finding me. But the challenge with that is that means you have really limited opportunities to connect with other people. So it's definitely a pro con. But if you were to just step outside that comfort zone for one goal, right? One event or one opportunity to connect, then even though it's uncomfortable, it's maybe limited to that one kind of goal at a time. And so I would encourage you, if this is something you really think is important, stepping outside that comfort zone might be something to be thinking about. And starting a conversation, similar kind of concept. You might be meeting new people that you aren't very familiar with, and it can feel uncomfortable to start the conversation. And so for some people, it's having some really go-to things that you can bring up, or, just saying hi and kind of checking in, or, maybe having a kind of go-to question or thought. That you can start. Sometimes that can help lessen experiences of anxiety, but just starting a conversation can go a long ways. Another one is just being intentional and present. This is, I think, one that we maybe disregard pretty easily, because in these moments, it's not uncommon for us to be looking around, or, if we feel really anxious in social situations, we might be looking at our phone. But that might suggest to somebody else that you're not as interested, or you're not as intentional and present. And if you're wanting to make those connections, being more intentional about your time with them and being more present in that moment can go a long ways. And another one that can be very challenging is following up. If we do make a connection with somebody that we do want to connect with more, trying to connect with them as a follow-up. It's like, hey, I really enjoyed talking with you. Like, would you want to hang out sometime? Or would you like to get together sometime? I found, your thoughts on this really helpful. And so maybe it's not only asking about an additional time, but also kind of trying to plan it out. Like, hey, like next week I have an opening, on Thursday? You know, do you want to grab lunch or something and we can continue this conversation? So it's not only kind of trying to see if they're open to that follow-up, but also trying to be very intentional about, hey, what are you doing next week? Or, you know, I would love to get something scheduled in a month from now. And then considering planning and time investment. This is, I think, the big one, right? Just because we're encouraging you to connect with others and build those connections doesn't mean it has to be all time consuming. It could just be one thing at a time. So maybe I make one connection I want to follow up and I plan out a time. And if you're really busy, you know, maybe it's a couple weeks out where it's like, I'm going to spend this 1 hour in a couple weeks with this person. It doesn't have to be all time consuming.
I have a question here.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes. How do you, let's say you meet somebody for the first time, you connect with somebody for the first time, and then you would want to see them again.
Mhm.
Okay, you would want to see them, meet them again.
Yeah.
What are some of the methods that you can use? I mean, can you just, I mean, for the start, ask the person's number, telephone number, or something? I mean, what are some of the methods that you can use to so that
Well,
you can get to see the person again? Because you
yeah.
don't know the person, you've not met, you don't know where they stay, you don't know
Yeah.
their telephone number, how to contact them, so on and so forth. I hope you get me.
Yes, I think I
Yes.
do. I think it's dependent on the type of connection you're making. If it's a more professional kind of networking connection, I would say most commonly people are sharing emails. Every once in a while they'll share phone numbers, but I would say the most common is email. So if you're trying to make a connection professionally or networking, I would encourage probably trying to do an email exchange versus phone number. But if it's another like graduate student or someone you're wanting to kind of connect with in terms of a friendship, I think phone number is totally appropriate. And how do you start that conversation? I think there are tons of great examples out there, but I'm happy to just give one in this moment, right? So maybe it's you're at some event, you're talking to someone, it seems like you're really connecting with them and you think, oh, like I want to like spend time with this person. They seem really cool. I think you could say, like, I've really enjoyed connecting with you today. Like, it would be great to, I don't know, grab lunch or hang out sometime. Would you be open to that? And if they say yes, then you can kind of follow up, like, hey, would you be open to maybe sharing our numbers so I could, you know, reach out to you about hanging out? So that way it gives them an opportunity to, one, determine, you know, because here's the thing, most people won't say no, at least not here in the US. Most often people will say, oh, I'm just really busy. I got a lot of things going on. And so it's not usually too bad, but that does give you a sense of like, is this someone really interested in connecting again? Or maybe not so much, but it does give them an opportunity when you say, hey, I've really enjoyed talking to you. Do you want to get together and hang out sometime? It gives them the option. And then if they say yes, then that gives you the go ahead to say, hey, let's exchange numbers or something. I hope that's helpful for you. I see, you know, Mark asked me on my phone number because we share the same class. I was totally okay with sharing my phone number. It's true, some people are not comfortable with that. That is true. And the truth is, if someone still wants to connect, but they don't feel comfortable exchanging phone numbers, they will often give another option. You know, maybe it's connecting over social media. You know, if it's a professional connection, maybe it's connecting over something like LinkedIn, for example. So if someone doesn't feel comfortable sharing their phone number, they might give you another option as well. Any other questions or thoughts? I know we've talked a lot about connecting with different professional kind of relationships. I'm curious, you know, your thoughts or experiences too. Your quietness. So I'll continue on. So the last thing that I'm going to mention, as you're thinking about Opportunities Connect, this is not, by no means a limited list. This is just talking about some of the workshops and events happening with the College of Graduate Studies, all of which is on their website. But there are different community groups that may be applicable to you that might provide an opportunity to connect. But there's also a range of different series, workshops where you might get some helpful advice on a range of different, graduate student related topics, research, career development. And so I would encourage you to check these out. These are opportunities not only to maybe learn, but also to connect. And so those might be things to be thinking about that you may not have been aware of, or maybe this is just a gentle reminder of other opportunities that are available. And last but not least, I'm just going to share some information. I'm from the Counseling and Mental Health Center. If you're wanting more kind of, specific, more hands-on kind of help with, connecting with others socially or gaining kind of skills to help develop those conversational skills or overcome anxiety as you're looking to connect more with others, we may be a really beneficial resource if you're looking for more specifics. Last but not least, here is my information. If you have any questions, that you didn't feel comfortable sharing with the group, or you'd like to just ask one-on-one, or you just want to follow up, you are welcome to send me an email or reach out. That's my information available. I will have Amanda stop recording just so that we can have a few minutes. If you have any questions,